Hello, I'm John Rossi, a touring drummer with a love of all things animal. When I'm on the road, I visit as many zoos, aquariums. Hey, wait a minute. What's going on? Hey, what's going on there? Hello? 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 We interrupt your regularly scheduled program to bring you Rossifari Zoo news. News you can use from the world of zoos and conservation. Every week, we bring you breaking news and analysis from around the globe, featuring the animals you love and the people who care for them. And here's your anchorman, John Rossi. Hello, 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 and welcome back to Rossifari Zoo News, your look at everything going on in the world of zoos, aquariums, conservation, and general animal weirdness. Y'all, welcome to Season 5 of Rossifari Zoo News, and we are kicking it off with a bang. But before we get to why this is such an exciting episode, I do want to start off the season by reminding everyone what exactly is going on here. If we have any new listeners coming in at the top of the season, this is Rossifari Zoo News, and it is a crowd-sourced zoo news program where you can tag me in zoo news-worthy stories at Rossifari on the socials, at Rossifari Pod on the TikTok machine, or email them to me, rossifaripod@gmail.com, and I'll give you credit and say your name at the end of the episode, whether I use the story or not, which is a pretty sweet deal for, people who like hearing their names and, I guess, narcissists. Okay, probably shouldn't insult the people who help me build this podcast every week. But it's always a good time, and a lot of times these episodes are just me talking. But that is not the case this week, as we are going to have a very special guest from a very special facility on to share a very special story in just a little bit here. But before we get to that, I do always take a moment at the top here to update everyone on what's going on in my life. And for those that have been listening, you know that I am currently in New England. And I spent the last 2 days actually at facilities doing stuff for the podcast. I've mentioned some of this on the socials, but in case you didn't see, I spent all of Wednesday with the team at New England Aquarium's Sea Turtle Hospital, which is not actually at the aquarium. It is in Quincy, Mass., as I'm told you have to say it. And it was an amazing experience. I got to go and see the hospital. I got to interview the director there for the podcast. I got to see them tagging a turtle and trying this new technique that they're using for turtle tagging, which is very exciting. And then I got to head out to Cape Cod and watch a sea turtle release, something that I have dreamed of seeing live since I was a little kid. It did not disappoint, y'all, and you'll hear more about that in my episode. But I was an emotional boy. What can I say? It was amazing. And then I'm recording this intro, at least, on Thursday, and I spent the day at Roger Williams Park Zoo, not actually doing anything with the zoo, but hanging out with the NEI bird team. If you've been listening for a while, you know that NEI, Natural Encounters, Inc., run by Steve Martin, the incredibly amazing trainer, has a bird show at Roger Williams Park Zoo, and it is awesome and wonderful, and highly recommend checking it out. And the team from last year that is back this year kind of stepped up into leadership positions. And the person who was leading it last year is off on different adventures. So we did an interview all about that. And it's a really good time. Can't wait to share that one with y'all as well. But of course, while I was at the zoo, I did run into multiple friends at the zoo there and got to see some cool animals. And I'll share some of those details as well, because I actually met two new keepers, not new keepers, but new to me keepers that were so amazing. I instantly was like, I need to have y'all on the podcast. which is why tomorrow I'm going to start my day back in Quincy, where I'm going to be going to a different cool thing that New England Aquarium does off-site there, and I'm gonna leave the details for the episode, but it's very cool. And then once I'm done with that, I'm going to head back to Roger Williams Park Zoo to hang out with my new friends. And after the zoo closes, we're heading to a food truck festival, and then I'm going to interview them. So lots of fun stuff, lots of cool stuff. And I'm just excited about all of these little adventures. And of course, then after that, I will actually head up to Maine to play a couple of shows before heading to New Hampshire for another show. And then back to Massachusetts for one more very exciting interview before heading back to home and the real world. So that is my life in a nutshell, and it's a good nutshell, y'all. I'm very pleased. I've been spending time with tree kangaroos and binturongs and sea turtles and red pandas, and hey, that's my logo. And got some bird time in there, and amazing people, amazing animals, and of course, amazing coffee. Oh, and scones. Oh, the scones. Ooh, so good. All right, I've digressed enough. That's everything I have to say. So let's get to it. All right. So I mentioned that we have a really big story and we have an exciting guest on for it. And it's going to be our headline story this week. So I'd officially like to welcome Paige Hale to the podcast. Paige is the senior manager of communications at the Georgia Aquarium. And I've gotten to know Paige over the last 2 years at the AZA conferences in Baltimore and Columbus because she honestly presents at multiple panels about PR and such. And I've learned a ton from her. And I've also had the chance to hang out socially. And it's always a good time. Paige is a lot of fun and very chill. And I'm excited to call her a friend and even more excited to have her on the podcast to talk about this absolutely incredible undertaking the Georgia Aquarium has done that she's been a huge part of.
Hello, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good.
Good. It's nice to see you not at the conference.
Exactly, yes. But I'm sure we will see each other in Calgary if you're going.
Absolutely. I will be there and I am looking forward to it.
Wonderful. Yeah. Yes, me too. So see you there.
Very good. Awesome.
Is there any place you want me to start?
The beginning?
The very beginning.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So it's a little complicated because this is a multi-year project that we've been working on. So this didn't happen overnight is what I should say. So several years ago, probably about 6 or 7 years ago, we took in some confiscated freshwater rays. And at that time, I started working with U.S. Fish and Wildlife because, as you know, when you take in a confiscation, that is, you have to go through the federal government. These animals are brought in through ports of entry. There's different case-by-case scenarios why an animal is confiscated. That's very nuanced. But when that happens, Fish and Wildlife needs to find a place for those animals to go if they're being confiscated. And more often than not, it is zoos and aquariums that take those animals. So that's where we came in this particular scenario. So I started that relationship with them, and great. We talked about these freshwater rays. They are on exhibit at Georgia Aquarium still to this day. If you visit us, they are upstairs. You can see them. And they serve as an ambassador to their species. And people can see they came to us as about the size of a ravioli. And now they're, they're much bigger now. So it also goes to show that they need a place to grow and thrive if they're not able to be sent back to whoever was bringing them in, or Fish and Wildlife, et cetera, et cetera. So right around COVID time, I started to get more information and more calls of, hey, we have to go to the airport. Oh, we have another confiscation. And I had a relationship with Fish and Wildlife. I knew, okay, not every single one of these confiscations you're going to tell the story or talk about, because it's a legal matter. you can't disclose a lot of this information, and rightfully so. A lot of the times it's just paperwork or permitting issues, and everything comes out in the wash. Not always is it nefarious, as some people think. I was in my office, and our director of fish and invertebrates came in and said, we have to go to the airport. There's another coral confiscation. And there was like 2 or 3 within a week time span. And I looked at her and I was like, I'm getting a vibe. Like, there's a vibe. Like, why are we getting so many? Right. And I had been talking with the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, the Wildlife Confiscation Network, which is launched in Southern California, and they're hoping to do that in the Southeast region. I had been talking to them, and they gave me the data that suggests that we're seeing more coral confiscations at an alarming rate. So we were kind of on the receiving end of those things that come in basically through the Atlanta airport. We have taken in, since 2010, since we started tracking confiscations, we've taken in close to 1,000 animals that have been confiscated at the Atlanta airport, Miami, different ports of entry. Of those close to 1,000 animals, more than half of them are corals. And then out of those animals, about 300 of them still reside at Georgia Aquarium, whether that's a fish, an invertebrate, a ray, or coral. So we wanted to answer the call the best that we could, and that's what we continue to do. So we're working with Fish and Wildlife and AZA on setting up this Southeast region for the Wildlife Confiscations Network. And we hosted the meeting here in Atlanta, and that's how NBC News and the New York Times came about. So we gave them access to our behind the scenes quarantine area, where we typically would keep animals that need quarantine or they were going on exhibit, things like that. Due to the number of confiscations we've had to take, we've totally turned that into a coral area. So we gave them access to that, and they got to talk to some of our aquarists about the threats that coral face, why we're seeing so many, what we think is happening, and what happens when a confiscation call comes in, and how we are involved. And really, our role is immediate care and triage. So when we get the call, we want to get there as quickly as possible and see what we can do to get those animals into clean water, a new system, etc. And they don't always stay with us. Sometimes they go back, they go to other zoos, they go to other aquariums. So we basically serve as like a foster family for them, if you will. And that is what I tell people, that work of confiscations or being a midway point for an animal that needs care is intrinsic to the value system of accredited zoos and aquariums. We don't want, if an animal is in need, we don't want to walk away from that. And the example we always use is, if we got a call that a shipment came in with 1,000 corals, we would try to take all of them. I don't think we could. I don't know. Let's ask Fish and Invertebrate if they have that much space. But we would at least try to find them homes. And that's also what this Southeast region with the Wildlife Confiscation Network is hoping to do. So if a call comes in and we need to find multiple locations, we can do it efficiently, and we can do it very quickly to get those animals where they need to go. So that's kind of the long and the short of it. But it's something we want the public to know about too, because you can't see these animals unless they're like our friends, the freshwater rays, who were confiscated and stayed with us. And then once that process was completed, they were, we took custody of those animals, and they're here. That's not always the case. So a lot of those times, those animals stay behind the scenes. And so the public would never know about it, but it's still very important. It's still a very important role that zoos and aquariums play. And it's a larger issue, right? Confiscations are not just happening in Atlanta. They're happening at all different ports of entry. And that's an important role of the federal government and Fish and Wildlife. And that relationship is really important for us and other zoos and aquariums too.
Absolutely. That's incredible. The whole thing is just incredible. Do y'all have any insight on why, or even just educated speculation on why coral is such a thing right now? Like, I feel like most people don't even know that coral are animals. And the fact that they are so highly trafficked is blowing my mind.
Yes. So first and foremost, definitely an animal. This is my favorite fact, right? They're not a rock. They're not a plant. They support close to 25% of marine life. Coral ecosystems are incredibly important. To hit it home for people in the United States, they protect us from a lot of storm surge. Because that's a lot of questions we get is like, okay, it's pretty, but how does it affect me? Well, when there's a really bad storm, coral is your barrier, right? Um, and there's a lot of different threats to coral in the ocean, bleaching, rising ocean temperatures, pollution, things like that. We, along with Fish and Wildlife and AZA, we think through some of that data, is it's mostly aquarium hobbyists and things being bought not through the right route. So that there's a very careful delineation there. You can be a coral and aquarium hobbyist. That we encourage that. We want people to be inspired by the ocean and aquatic life and to have that in your home. That's something that's really interesting. That's totally legal. Totally fine. But sometimes things are brought in that are not supposed to be. You might be getting it from a place that's not reputable, and that it was an outgrowth probably of COVID. And people being at home, and then you don't quite know what you're getting off the internet. So it's buying things from reputable suppliers and things like that. And to my point earlier, it's not necessarily nefarious. Sometimes it's just a permitting issue, or there's one too many, or things like that. So it's very nuanced, and it's very case by case. But they have to, if they have to be held for a short period of time, long period of time, because of a permitting issue or anything like that, they need to be put in a triage situation, and that's where we come in. Even if it's not a trafficking situation or anything like that, just a simple paperwork issue, and we take those as well because it's still an animal in need.
That's awesome. Very cool. I'm glad to know that it's not as nefarious. So much of the trafficking stuff that we talked about, I know it's hard to call it nefarious when it's like, the traditional medicinal uses and stuff, even though they've been disproven, but it still kind of comes across as, at least a lot of this is maybe accidental on the part of the person. But that also shows why education is so important. So getting into, hugely important news sources like the New York Times, CBS News, Rossifari, that's very cool. I do have one other question for you about this that's kind of shocking me, honestly. So you are, if I remember correctly, senior manager of communications at Georgia Aquarium. Is that correct? Okay, yes. Cool. Yeah. Why or how, or I think it's cool, don't get me wrong, but the fact that you were the person who was like in touch with fish and wildlife and like handling a lot of this seems surprising to me in a cool way, in a good way. But like, what is your role, and how do you get to be so involved with this side of things as opposed to, approving podcasters that want to talk to you guys and stuff like that?
Well, I still do that part.
Oh, good.
So a little bit of a unique situation. So yes, I am senior manager of communications at Georgia Aquarium. So I handle all public relations communications and social media for the aquarium. This, like I said earlier, came about because we got these freshwater rays, and I wanted to do a news article on them. And that's how I got in touch with Fish and Wildlife Public Affairs. And that's basically who, anytime I want to talk about a confiscation or anything like that, I go through their public affairs office. And rightfully so, to anyone listening that is in public relations at a zoo or aquarium, that's the route that we all have to go. That's not unique to me when it comes to confiscations. I took that story. It was great. Had a great time with Fish and Wildlife. It turned into a large story similar to this one. And it kind of sat there for a while. And then when I noticed the trend, along with our director of fish and invertebrates, of the number of confiscations, the storytelling wheels started to turn. And I particularly like a challenge. And I will say getting people interested, this may be a shock, getting people interested in coral is not easy. Things like marine mammals and marine megafauna are much easier. So I've been at the aquarium almost 10 years. And in those 10 years, I have always wanted to do a big piece on coral. So it took me almost a decade, but we got there. because it had turned into somewhat of a passion project, I took on, all right, I want to talk to Fish and Wildlife Public Affairs and see what we can do. And they were totally receptive. They were incredible to work with. And they gave me the information that I needed, and we followed the rules and what we could and could not say and things like that. And it turned out to be just a wonderful experience. And I also managed all of the stuff with the New York Times and the NBC News piece and things like that. So that's also where my role comes in, is managing crews and the storytelling elements, setting up the interviews, all that stuff that you don't get to see, but that's behind the scenes. But it felt bigger than me, right? It felt bigger than just Georgia Aquarium. This is something that a ton of zoos and aquariums are doing, and it's shadow work that is done that, like I said, intrinsic to the value system. We don't do it to be seen. We don't do it to be in the New York Times. And I became like a dog with a bone. I was like, we're gonna do it. And the only way that I was able to do that, it was with the great partnership with AZA and with Fish and Wildlife. We could not have carried all of that on our own. But it's been wonderful to hear public perception and public response to this as well. I've had colleagues, and things reach out and say, I saw the story in the New York Times or I saw the NBC News. I had no idea, it's so great. But we've also had guests tell us, oh, I've seen, XYZ. And that's been rewarding at the same time, because I never thought that it would resonate on that level. Right. And my favorite part is we've had guests tell us thank you. And they say, thank you for doing that work. And I think on behalf of all zoos and aquariums that do this work, we don't do it for the thank you. We do it because it needs to be done. And that kind of made it full circle for me. I was like, all right, we've gotten the story out. We've done our work, but the work continues, because we'll continue to get those calls. We'll continue to answer those calls. I may not be involved. Maybe we'll see, maybe again, but it was incredibly important to me and to the brand of Georgia Aquarium to show that this is much bigger than us. And that's why I kind of took the lead, so to speak.
That's awesome. That's really inspirational for me too, because as a person who's, in this world as a storyteller, to see that turn into such big action, I think that's really cool. And I always, because I have great relationships with a lot of PR people at zoos and aquariums now, thanks to the podcast. And I always encourage them to push more of these stories, because like you said, you're not doing it for those reasons. But if the public doesn't know that that's happening, then when they do hear the anti-aquarium, anti-zoo crusaders going off, they don't have the response of, well, did you see this? This is cool. And I think getting it out there to the wider public is very important and equips them, which is awesome. I think we need more of that. I always encourage that. So thank you for being that dog with the bone, and congratulations on not just the amazing work, but turning such a passion project into such a success. It's very cool, Paige.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, and we need storytellers, right?
Yes.
And it doesn't need to be just you and I or other PR people. We want to turn our guests into storytellers of, guess what I saw at Georgia Aquarium or at this aquarium or zoo. Those people are storytellers in themselves as well. So if we can equip people with education about things like this, or even we make a connection with guests and an animal they see here that they interact with, they'll go tell someone else, and they're a storyteller in their own right. And there's great work being done everywhere. So this is unique to us in our specific situation that's been covered, but there are so many different stories at different zoos and aquariums that I love hearing from my colleagues and hearing what they're working on or what they have up and coming. So it's been great. No complaints.
Yeah, no, it has been really fun getting to share just all of those stories, as I go around the country. Like, what an absolute pleasure and treat. So yeah, that is very cool. I do have one other quick question for you.
Sure.
How's my buddy Tank doing?
It's great.
Good.
Still vibing.
That's all that matters. Tank, for those listening, if you don't know, is the green sea turtle at the aquarium who I am madly in love with. And
Yes.
I can sit all day and just stare at that big window and even the little side window that he hides in sometimes. I know where to go. I know where.
Yes.
I've been there enough.
His little man cave. Yes,
Yes,
that's what we call it. That
exactly.
little. Yes.
Nice.
And
Awesome.
a girl on my team, she does a lot of our social content, and she has so much tank footage that she needs to use. I mean, and even our fans on social like request tank. So like the fan club is also doing great.
That's incredible. Yes, please tell that person that you just got an official request, a media request, you can call it that, and we need some more tank content in the next couple of days. Thank you.
Yes, we can make that happen.
Perfect. Awesome. Thanks for doing this, and I will see you at the conference.
Wonderful. Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for caring about coral and everyone listening that cares about coral. But yes, I will see you in Calgary. It'll be so much fun.
Yay. Take care, Paige.
Thanks. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Paige is awesome, and that was so cool, and I love the Georgia Aquarium so much. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. But that brings us to our births for the week, and we start with another red panda birth, and one that I was so annoyed, not really, of course, but because it got announced right after I recorded last week's episode. Like, I literally saw the post within minutes of uploading the episode, but I didn't have time to jump back in, but whatever, I digress. Our friends at the Chattanooga Zoo have a healthy male red panda cub, their first pandlet in 8 years. His mom, Saffron, is doing a great job taking care of the little one, so the staff has been mostly hands-off. The baby was named Pilatus by the pilot who donated his time and expertise to fly Saffron from her previous home to her new one in Chattanooga. I think it's really cool the zoo rewarded that by letting him name Pilatus. Very cool. And that's not the only of my faves I get to share about this week, as for the second week in a row, I get to announce a tree kangaroo Joey. Zoo Miami has announced the birth of a Matchie's tree kangaroo, which is now old enough to be peeking out of Mom Poppy's pouch. I am obviously so excited. Disney's Animal Kingdom has announced the birth of a Hartman's Mountain zebra foal, or zeeblet. The baby is already visible with the rest of the herd, usually hanging close to Mom Juno and Sister Cricket. The Pittsburgh Zoo recently shared a really cool story about a penguin chick named Hattie. Hattie is a macaroni penguin, and sadly, her parents decided to discard her egg. The team at the aquarium stepped in and took care of the egg until it hatched, at which point she was placed with adoptive parents. The parents who were deemed most likely to do the best job raising her were a bit of a unique choice, as they are Gentoo penguins. Now, remember that I mentioned that her name is Hattie? That's actually short for hat trick because a player scoring 3 goals in hockey is called a hat trick, and Hattie had 3 successes to get where she is today. Conceived by one set of parents, hatched by humans, and now raised by another set of parents of a different species of penguin. What a fun story. And again, it just shows the amazing work that these facilities will go to for their animals. Speaking of penguin chicks, Shed Aquarium also welcomed some new penguin chicks, although admittedly with less drama than in the previous story. 2 southern rockhopper penguins hatched just days apart at the aquarium, and both are being raised by their biological parents. Congrats to Shed Aquarium. Our friends at the Duke Lemur Center have announced the birth of 2 sets of mouse lemur twins. Moms Teasel and Azalea gave birth to Artemisia, Sweet William, Peanut, and Macadamia. Manor Wildlife Park in Wales has announced the birth of a Sumatran tiger cub named Zaza. She's the first tiger ever born in Wales, thus making her only slightly less surprising than if she had been a tiger born to Wales. Oof, I'm sorry. That one was genuinely bad. I apologize for that. But hey, yay, Welsh tiglet. And then last but not least in births this week, Zoos Victoria have welcomed a koala joey that is now popping out of the pouch at their Healesville Sanctuary location. It's always so funny announcing marsupial births when the animals were technically born like 6 months earlier, but almost no one got to see them. Speaking of which, I know of another marsupial birth that I can't tell you about yet, but I'm already really excited to do so when I can. And then that brings us to our deaths for the week. The Hertfordshire Zoo has announced the passing of Moto, the male lion who has called the zoo home since 2011. He was 17 years old. Moto was one of the most popular animals at the zoo, and his passing will leave a mark on the people who cared for him and those who visited him over the past 13 years at the zoo. He will be missed. The Dallas Zoo has announced the passing of Jada, one of the male African painted dogs who called the zoo home. He was 7 years old at the time of his passing. Acute renal failure appears to be the cause of death. Jada was the alpha of the small pack at the Dallas Zoo, and as such, the zoo is providing extra enrichment as well as paying extra attention to the remaining members as they adjust to the loss. The Chester Zoo in the UK has announced the sudden death of one of their elephants, and for once it isn't related to EEHV. Instead, the 20-year-old female named Sundara Highway had her intestines twist. The veterinary team rushed to help, but it's an illness that is very hard to treat in elephants, and sadly, they were unable to prevail. And yes, this is twisted intestines, which you hear about more in like dogs, but can happen to, almost any mammal species, including humans. And sticking in the UK for a bit, the Big Cat Sanctuary has said goodbye to Cara, their female Pallas Cat. Sadly, she was suffering from renal failure, despite the fact that her kidney disease had been medically managed successfully for many years, and eventually she passed away. Cara was known for her big personality and her ability to make life challenging for her keepers in the cheekiest way possible. She is greatly, greatly missed. And last but not least in this section, the Calgary Zoo has said goodbye to Baffin, their 7-year-old male polar bear. Baffin and Siku, his longtime companion, were sparring in the pool, and the sparring match ended with Baffin not resurfacing. A necropsy showed that he drowned after suffering a crushing injury to his trachea. It seems the injury caused Baffin to lose consciousness underwater and thus drown. In all other ways, the team that performed the necropsy, which was the zoo's veterinary team, but also included an independent pathologist, found the bear to be in perfect health. The keeper team is obviously devastated, and the zoo actually closed the following day to allow them and the rest of the staff to grieve in peace, sending all the love and condolences. And moving on from births and deaths, we get to the rest of our zoo news section. We're actually going to start this section off with a follow-up on the leadership crisis the San Francisco Zoo is experiencing. Now, you may remember I went into great detail about this problem back on my April 19th episode of Zoo News. If you haven't heard it yet, it's worth going back to right now. The situation with zoo director Tanya Peterson is continuing to be investigated by the San Francisco Chronicle, as well as the board of the zoo. In an update to earlier reporting, the Chronicle has identified 8 more friends and family who received special benefits due to their connection to Peterson. And one of them is really strange and worth sharing. So back in 2021, a local blues artist without any real following released a tune that was basically a love song about his girlfriend hanging out at the zoo. It was called See My Baby and included lyrics like, "She spends her days at the local zoo, knows what the monkeys do. Nothing's gonna stop us from misbehaving when I get to see my baby tonight." The song became the official radio jingle for the zoo, and that free advertising helped Dayton raise over $9,000 to record and produce an album. The zoo did not pay for the rights to the song, but did promote it and Dayton in general and some of his other music on their website and YouTube channel. Well, the song, See My Baby? The baby in question is zoo director Tanya Peterson, who was then Dayton's girlfriend and is now his wife. And that's just one of many examples the Chronicle has uncovered since the last time I spoke about this. The union that covers the keepers at the zoo had a vote of non-confidence in Tanya that passed with 97% approval. 97%. I don't even think Taylor Swift has a 97% approval rating. Anyway, I don't want to dwell too much on this problem again, but as I mentioned back in April, I've spoken directly to many former and current keepers about the problem at the zoo, and it is very real. And the thing that really gets me about it, let's just say for a second that Peterson is right, just for a second, and that she is doing nothing wrong. And the fact that giant pandas are heading to San Francisco is proof that she should be the director now and forever, and she's just awesome. Well, even if that is technically true, 97% of the keeper staff disagrees. Negative publicity that is well vetted is being produced regularly from the San Francisco Chronicle, which is a paper with a great reputation. This isn't just like comments on Facebook, you know? Why would you want to stay in that position? Like, right? Like, the best case scenario here is that 97% of the people who care for the animals you are ultimately in charge of have no confidence in you. And honestly, that's putting it nicely. The word hate gets tossed around frequently when talking to people directly about the situation. But yeah, and you are bringing constant bad press to a facility and industry that has enough ill-informed detractors already. It is enough. This clinging to power is honestly really tough to see. I hope this gets resolved and gets resolved soon. All right, so enough about that. I hate being negative, and we do have some other sad stuff coming up. So I need something positive here. Let's see. Nothing makes people happier than dogs, but this is zoo news. Oh, wait, I have a zoo news story about a dog. Woohoo! A British organization named Dogs for Wildlife trains conservation dogs that head into the field in Africa, but they want to make sure the dogs are ready for the sights and smells they will encounter there before heading to the continent. As such, they recently took two of their dogs, a 2-year-old Cocker Spaniel named Fudge and a 15-month-old Fox Red Labrador named Rocket, to Yorkshire Wildlife Park, where they got to become familiar with the sights and smells of leopards, rhinos, giraffes, and zebras. Once fully ready to go, both dogs will be working with teams trained to help prevent poaching, and Rocket will also be working as a detection dog at airports to help prevent wildlife smuggling. And part of that training was getting to hang out at a zoo. Pretty cool. Next, we move on to a couple of sad stories about red pandas. The Toronto Zoo recently announced that Sakura, their recently arrived 10-year-old female red panda that just gave birth to 2 cubs, has been showing neurological symptoms that are concerning enough for the zoo to have taken her to the wildlife hospital for an examination. When not being treated, she is still taking care of and bonding with her cubs and is doing a great job raising them. And the zoo has promised to announce more information when they have it. But it's hard to see this. I hope Sakura is okay. And going along with that story, Binder Park Zoo has announced that Tushar, the 16-year-old red panda who calls the zoo home, has been experiencing multiple health issues and is currently being cared for in the vet hospital. At 16, Tushar is very old for a red panda. In fact, he's one of the oldest in the United States. Here's hoping he gets to keep on keeping on, but if not, I'm grateful to the zoo for doing such incredible work to help him out and for being so transparent about his health issues so that his fans know where he is when they go trying to see him. And actually, onto the other pandas, 2 quick stories about giant pandas. First of all, Zoo Atlanta has announced that both Yalun and Lunlun are experiencing their annual pseudo-pregnancies, meaning they are more likely to be hanging out in their behind-the-scenes dens for the next few weeks. Also, the San Diego Zoo has announced that the giant pandas that just arrived from China will be visible to the public on August 8th. And last but not least, in zoo news this week, the Cincinnati Zoo received a truly beautiful red fox that was taken in by an Ohio wildlife rehabilitator after it was found abandoned in a box at an apartment complex. The fox in a box? Anyway, will be living behind the scenes for a while, but has been added to the ambassador animal team at the zoo and will soon be doing random encounters around the zoo. Check out at Cincinnati Zoo for pics because this is a gorgeous fox that has a lot of red and a lot of black coloring. It's just a stunning animal. And that brings us to
Conservation news time. Oh yeah.
All right, so we are running very long here as we are just now hitting conservation news. So I'm going to do one quick story here and then skip to our animal holidays. and say farewell, because lots of life is happening right now. But for that story, if you're wondering what to do to see animals in San Francisco, if you're conflicted about visiting the zoo with its current leadership issues, and let me be clear, you shouldn't be. The zookeepers do amazing work and the animal care is incredible, but I needed a good start to this story. You have the opportunity to see more wildlife in the San Francisco Bay, apparently. In particular, a variety of different types of whales and other cetaceans have been visiting in unprecedented numbers. Now, back in the 1970s, it was actually hard to find any cetaceans in the bay, but now it's very common to find harbor porpoises, gray whales, humpback whales, and bottle-nosed dolphins. And conservationists agree this is a very good or very bad sign. They just don't know which one it is. See, it is very possible that this represents the rejuvenation of an ecosystem these species left and are now returning to. And it's also very possible that it represents them trying to find new spaces to live as they run away from their usual habitats, which have become more degraded and polluted and changed temperature, and like all the other bad stuff that comes from humans and climate change and all that jazz. It's definitely something that will be continued to be researched, and it's complicated by the fact that the answer could be all of the above. The nuanced differences between the species could ultimately mean that, for instance, bottlenose dolphins are returning to the bay because their food sources have repopulated the area because of conservation efforts, while humpback whales have been fleeing climate crises and are heading to the bay for that reason. It's hard to say. So it's just too early to tell. And this is obviously something that researchers are going to continue to look into, and that's very important. But I think it's such an interesting story to highlight, not only because it's important conservation news, and that's what the segment is called, but also because it just shows how even like every thought needs to have so many other thoughts, and there's so much nuance to all of this. You know, when I first read that cetaceans are showing up in the bay, I was like, oh, cool. Yay, more whales and dolphins and stuff. That seems good. And it might be, and it might not be, or maybe it's both. And this is what is constantly confronting conservationists. And I find it such a fascinating way to think about this thing that we talk about all the time. But yeah, so interesting story. We'll definitely keep an eye on it for sure.
Oh, animal holidays. Animal holidays. Hey!
And that brings us to our animal holidays for the week. And it is July, which is Plastic Free July, National Bison Month, Parks and Recreation Month, and Wild About Wildlife Month. Then for our individual days, we have July 26th is International Mangrove Conservation Day. The 29th is International Tiger Day. And the 31st is World Ranger Day and National Mutt Day. I, for one, will be celebrating Buzz, my favorite mutt, on National Mutt Day. Yay! And then we actually start August this week, which is Asian Elephant Awareness Month, National Catfish Month, National Parks Month, and August is for Antelope Month. So many months this month. And then August 1st is Marine Protected Areas Day and Manga Bay Awareness Day. And that's it. That's how far we're going to get until I talk to y'all again. So those are your animal holidays for the week. All right, there you have it, folks. Another episode of Rossifari Zoo News is in the books. I would like to say thank you to all of my patrons, especially my Red Panda level patrons, Dr. Laura Schenk, Dr. Stephen Williamson, Barbara Bennett, Jenny Owens, and Kevin Williams. And remember, you too can support the pod for as little as $3 a month by going to patreon.com/Rossifari. I'd also like to say thank you to everyone who contributed to the episode this week, including Anya Keene, Colleen Lenahan, Kim Cooley-Croninger, Carrie Kirkpatrick, Kevin Williams, Emily Rockbuck, Cinna Shank, Ann Yoshioka, Sam Evans, Matt Patford, Dr. Laura Shank, Andrew King, Miles Rossi, Ali Malensky,
Kay Malensky. Jay Meredith, Tiana, Lizard Dunlevy, Dr. Zoe Rossi, Jen Torpy, Elizabeth Charles, who's not going to yell at me this week for doing this. And last but not least, Anna McEachran. Thank you all so much for contributing to the episode. And thank you to Taylor Isaac Gray for working with me on that incredible Malensky's theme. Amazing. Y'all listen to this podcast. That's insane to me. But hey, whatever. I make it, so I'm even more insane. No, but seriously, thank you all so much for being here. And I'm so excited at where we're heading in season 5. This is such a great start. And yay, team. Love you all. Thank you so much. And remember, friends, the words newsy credits backwards are Steiderkuswen. The Rossifari podcast is produced, hosted, and engineered by John Rossi. Editing and fact-checking by John and Dr. Zoe Rossi. Our theme song is Sevens by Nathan Burke, performed by Nathan and John. Interrupting John theme and additional voices by Taylor Isaac Gray. You can reach John directly on Instagram and Facebook at Rossifari or by email at rossifaripod@gmail.com. Rossifari is part of the Daydreamer Media Network. Now, stop listening to me and go visit a zoo. And last but not least in this section, the